So for a guy like me who hates horror movies and being scared in general, the It movie franchise was never at the top of my list of movies to see. In fact, the first movie wasn't even on my list, and I had every intention to skip that movie in general. Nothing against the movie, I just don't like being scared. However, with how much praise the first movie got and how great a phenomenon it became, from critics to fans to box office records to word of mouth, my curiosity was piqued, and I found myself wanting to be on the inside of the conversation. And so eventually I saw the first It movie, only after it was released on streaming and not in the theaters, just to see what all the fuss was about. And even though I still thought that the first movie crossed my comfort line and I still found it pretty scary and unsettling on many occasions, I still loved the actors and the characters, and I found the movie to be well executed as a film across the board, and I was able to just barely get around the scary elements to enjoy it in general. And now that brings us to It Chapter 2, and having seen the first one, now I felt compelled more than ever to see the second one in theaters in order to be a part of the conversation this time around. And so I did just that for nearly 3 solid hours, and what did I ultimately think of the film? Not only did I think this was a solid film all around, but I'm surprised to go one step further and say that I really liked it, and another step further to say that I actually enjoyed it more than the first one. So let's talk about how this movie worked. And first and foremost, you have the cast. Now, this movie would be nothing without its spectacular cast of characters, and I thought that everyone did a great job. So let's break down the members of the Losers Club specifically in order of my favorite to least favorite, and then we'll talk about Pennywise later. My first favorite of the Losers Club is Bill Hader as Richie. Hands down the best of the Losers Club, not only as an actor, but also as a character, and his performance and character is the best part of the entire movie, and not just it within the Losers Club, but he makes this movie, from his comedic timing, his story arc, and scene-stealing dialogue. And I won't go into spoilers, but there's a hidden element to his character that is revealed in this film that only made him more interesting and more compelling overall. In my number 2 spot, we have James Ransone as adult Eddy. This was scary, amazing casting, since he's playing the adult version of Jack Dylan Grazer, whom I love to begin with, and they not only act the same, but they also look very much alike. It's kind of weird how spot on that casting was. His character was funny and worked off of Bill Hader's Richie amazingly. And even though the marketing team behind this movie really pushed for the Beverly Billy as the duo to follow, it's Richie and Eddy that are by far the winning duo by a landslide and basically steal the movie together. In my number 3 spot, we have James McAvoy as adult Billy. He wasn't the standout like you'd think that he would be, but his performance is amazing nonetheless. He arguably had some of the most gut-punching moments for his character, where I just felt for the poor guy and his lingering grief for what happened to his little brother in the first film. James McAvoy has always been a great actor, and he definitely brought his A-game to this role. And in my number 4 spot, we have Jessica Chastain as adult Beverly. Now, I liked her well enough in this role, and I've always respected her as an actress. That being said, I thought there was more of a fire and spark to Sophia Lilith's portrayal as Beverly in the first one that was pretty much absent in Jessica Chastain's performance, in her interpretation of the character. So even though I prefer Sophia Lilith's Beverly portrayal, I still liked Jessica Chastain well enough, and she definitely nailed a couple of scenes very, very well. And in my number 5 spot, we have Jay Ryan as adult Ben. Now, not gonna lie, I just found this actor insanely attractive and also endearing to watch in many scenes, but I loved how he worked off of the rest of the cast, and he did a great job at tackling the story elements from the first movie, where his character is in love with Jessica Chastain's Beverly without ever telling her. I liked how they handled this, and even though his acting isn't quite at the level of Bill Hader as James McAvoy, he still brought his best foot forward, and I enjoyed him well enough. In my number 6 spot, we actually have Andy Bean and Wyatt Olaf as both versions of adult and young Stanley. I'm calling them both out since I feel that they have equal amounts of screen time within this movie playing the same character, but I can't really talk about this character a lot for the sake of spoilers. That being said, I thought the element that his character plays in the movie was moving, and I appreciated the effect it had on the other characters, but I'll leave it at that, since saying anything more could spoil the movie for those who don't know the story. And in my number 7 spot, and sadly my least favorite, we have Isaiah Mustafa as adult Mike. He sadly drew the short straw of the group because he's basically exposition guy for the entire movie, and he's there to move the story along as he interacts with the characters. He's basically the guy that kicks off the story and continues to feed the audience information on the developing plot of the movie, and sadly, he just loses out on getting really any compelling character moments to make him really stand out in a way like the rest of the cast had their moments. Now we'll talk about Pennywise the Clown, played tremendously by Bill Skarsgård. He's just as terrifying to watch on screen, and it's amazing how horrifying Bill Skarsgård plays this role. I will say that he had less dialogue and less creepy character moments in this movie as opposed to the first one, which I personally didn't have a problem with, and one could argue that that was part of the reason why maybe I enjoyed this movie a little more than the first one, simply because I wasn't quite as creeped out by him this time around. Nonetheless, he's just as scene-stealing and terrifying as ever in his performance. The only real qualm I can see from other people's perspectives is that he has less creepy, slow burn character moments in this one than he did in the first one. Another surprise I had was how much I did not feel this movie was too long. It felt just fine for me. For a film that clocks in at nearly 3 hours, I was expecting for it to feel bloated, with many elements drawing out way too long, but that wasn't the case for me because I thought it had perfect balance of heartfelt character moments in between the scary scenes, and I enjoyed these slower character moments when they tied into flashbacks of the kid versions of themselves because it only helped me care more about these characters, and without those moments, the impact in the second act wouldn't be nearly as great as it was, in my opinion. Now, this wasn't a perfect movie, so let's talk about elements that I thought didn't work. Considering the movie is almost 3 hours long, I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get more explanation for many narrative plot points, specifically in the origin of Pennywise and the way it's discovered on how to potentially stop him. I found they barely scratched the surface of telling us this important information or giving us these aha moments to where they almost seemed like an afterthought to the filmmakers. So I wish we would have gotten more explanation and even more history around the character and why he is the way he is and why he's doing what he's doing. I also took issue with a few loose ends in the overall story. There were certain character arcs not fully explored, certain elements introduced but never expanded upon, and some things left completely unanswered in general. It didn't take away from the film, but it's definitely what holds this film back from being a great film, in my opinion. Now, I don't think this movie is quite as scary as the first one, but it's definitely filled with some truly terrifying moments from start to finish. There was specifically one moment that made my whole body physically squirm in my seat. But it's the journey we take with these friends and these characters that kept me engaged and determined to see this through to the end. And even though it won't ever be a first pick for me in terms of easy movies to stick on and watch in the background, it will be among the few scary movies that I can actually get on board with and probably enjoy watching again. It Chapter 2 was an enjoyable movie that surprised me in many ways. Sure, there were scary scenes I won't be looking forward to watching again, and some narrative holes that aren't explained very well, but the overall presentation and pacing, accompanied by the stellar cast with a major boost by Bill Hader, ultimately won me over in ways that the first one didn't. I'm going to give It Chapter 2 a B+. And that's my review for you. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and opinions and what you thought of this movie. Feel free to share them down below. And thank you all again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Ryan Boehme, signing off. Bye, everyone.